Welcome to the Bookish Introverts Podcast. Join host Amazon bestselling author Brett Nelson and avid reader Melanie Dyer as they dive in to review books they've read, then chat with the amazing authors behind them. Quiet minds, big bookshelves. You don't want to miss it.
Hey everyone, it's Brett, and welcome to episode 10 of our Baker Publisher Summer Author event. We have a great episode lined up for today, and I'm so excited to introduce you to one of Christian Suspense's finest. With over 60 novels and more than 1.5 million copies sold, this powerhouse storyteller has a knack for keeping readers flipping the pages. She's a USA Today bestselling author, a Carol Award winner, a Reader's Choice Award recipient, and a Holt Medallion finalist. So today we're here to dive into her latest Edge of Your Seat release. It's called Perilous Tides, and it's book 2 in her Hidden Bay series. So whether you've been a longtime fan of hers or just now discovering her work, you are in for a great treat today. So Elizabeth Goddard, welcome to the podcast. Come on in and say hi to everyone.
Thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to this.
Oh, you're welcome. These are my favorite types of books when it comes to Christian fiction. I love like the suspense-y type, so this is my jam.
Oh, that's great. I love to hear that.
What about you? Is suspense? Is that kind of what's your reading look like? Yeah,
romantic suspense. Yeah, I read widely, but I will. Yeah, most always. That's my go-to.
Okay.
Romantic suspense,
which makes perfect sense. That
right?
has
right?
for decades. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Who are your favorites to read?
Well, I love all the Baker Revell authors, of course.
Never found a bad one, honestly.
No. Yeah, they're just fantastic. And I love Colleen Coble. I love all the Christian romantic suspense authors. And I do step out into the general market as well. And I like Elizabeth Gardner. She's an excellent writer. And I have a few people I read outside of the Christian market,
Oh, I do too. Yeah. My favorite's Mary Higgins Clark. She was sort of my very first foray into adult reading. Of course, when I was younger, I did the Hardy Boys and Nancy Drew, but I can remember vividly the very first book of hers I picked up was at I don't know if they do it so much these days, but back in the day when schools used to have like the book fairs. And as a kid, those were my favorite things. And the very first one I picked up at a book fair was a Mary Higgins Clark book. And ever since I read that book, I was a fan. I've got every one of her books.
Right. And she's clean reading as well, and I can add to that list John Grisham. I wouldn't necessarily say romantic suspense, but a little, it's suspenseful and it's interesting. So, and it's clean.
And it's clean. So, and like he and Mary Higgins Clark, they are prime examples of you don't have to have filth to make it entertaining.
Right. Just a good story.
Just tell us a good story. Yeah. And I can't tell you, and I'm sure you're probably the same. There are so many books that I have picked up and put down before I was done with it, and there was nothing wrong with it plot wise, story wise, but just, I couldn't get past all the filthy language. So,
right. Yeah. It's like, I'm done with this, forget it.
Yeah.
You have to be
exactly.
careful. So you have to know your two authors. And that's why I do, like I said, Lisa Gardner. I mean, there might be a something here and there, but it's just a good story, and it's nothing that's going to drag me down.
And I'm not a total prude about it. I can deal with an occasional one, but I can remember, I don't even remember who the author was. It was not an author I'd ever heard of. It was probably about maybe 6 months ago. I was reading, it was a brand new author to me. And I think they were probably more of an indie. And I am not kidding. There were like 20 F words just in the first 2 pages. I was like, sorry, but not doing it. Yeah.
I'm telling you.
Exactly.
So just losing part of their audience. You have to think, you're losing a huge part of an audience that you could have to read the books. And I'm kind of thinking that on the other side of things, people, that language, it doesn't necessarily bother them. They're probably not going to read a book that's a great book and think, oh, it doesn't have enough language. I'm like,
exactly.
So why bother putting it in?
Whoever said, oh, gee, I wish it had more profanity. I would be tempted to say that's a very small percentage of people that have ever said that. So,
so whoever's out there listening, this is our advice to you.
Exactly. Tone it down a little. It's all about getting the readers as authors ourselves. So that's kind of a good segue. Before we get into the book, tell us a little bit about your path to becoming an author. I always find that so interesting. Like, when did you write your first book? What made you decide, hey, I think I'm going to try writing a novel for the first time? So can you give us a little bit of your background on that?
Yeah, mine is a very, very long story because I kind of like always kind of inside of me knew I wanted to be a writer. And from a very, very young age, I've been recently telling people about this because it's come back to me, but my mom really planted that seed in me because I had written a poem. I think I was just 7 or 8 years old, and she says, I'm going to send this to a publisher. And then I never heard anything about it. So I just decided, well, she didn't send it. And then recently I decided, maybe she did send it and I got rejected, and she just didn't have the heart to tell me. But I was an avid reader, and I think she just very early planted that seed in me, about publishing. And, in high school, I was a writer, and in college I was writing, but I never really thought of being a novelist, or really pursuing it because, you got to make a living.
You do.
I got my degree in computer science, and I went into that field, and so writing was just kind of hovering around somewhere, and I didn't know what to do with it until I stayed home with my first child because I had a traveling job and I just couldn't do that. So I just went ahead and stayed home. And then I thought, well, maybe now's the time. And so I was 30, I think, when I just finally started deciding that, I might look into this. And so I started attending conferences every year. And then I started attending the ACFW conference every year, and then meeting editors and agents and making friends. And, you got to be with your people. You get in with that group of people. And,
exactly.
Then that drive to become published was just settled in me. And
it's easier for doors to be open to you if you're immersing yourself in that type of environment.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And then I can say all of my friends that I pretty much talk to every single day are writers, because people I met at the conference, and we've been friends for decades.
Yeah. And I've been to several writers conferences, but I've never been to the ASCFW. And that is one of my goals as a writer. I've only been reading Christian fiction exclusively for about probably 2, maybe 3 years now. So there are still authors that I haven't even read yet. Like Colleen Coble. Right. I've not read any of hers. I've got several of hers in my Kindle. But yeah, I really want to go to ASCFW and be with other authors. That just would be
right.
Yeah.
I'm glad that you got on board with reading Christian fiction. Actually, my first Christian author to read was in my early 20s, was Bodie Taney, and I read all of her Zion Chronicles. And to me, those are romantic suspense. They're historical romantic suspense. And so that was kind of when I went to the Writers Conference, I was trying to pitch and write historical romantic suspense.
Okay. They're on my list of one. Like, I want to read their books. So yeah,
they're fantastic.
There's so many authors I want to discover.
It's an exciting world. It's never been a better time to be a reader or a writer.
Yeah. Do you feel like it's easier to be an author these days? Now, how long have you been writing?
Well, I attended my first conference in 2001, but my first book didn't come out to 2007. So, publishing. And so, I've been writing to be published, for quite a while, but, actually published, I'm coming up on almost 20 years being published.
Okay.
But yeah, so a really long time, but it's a journey. I started small and a certain publisher, and then I ended up probably in 2017 signing with my dream publisher to write trade. But in between, I was writing for Love and Suspense for about maybe 10 years. Romantic suspense, short novels, the category romances.
Yeah. Okay. Have you ever written anything other than romantic suspense?
Well, I started pitching historical, and I would enter contests, and I didn't never do really very well. And then this is a funny story. My daughter, she was 13 at the time, asked if I could write her a dragon story. So I just wrote up a little dragon story, and my family's like, "Oh, this is so much better." And so I entered that in a contest, and then at ACFW, it was the Noble Theme contest, I think, in their sci-fi fantasy category, and it finaled.
Really?
So for 3 years in a row, I was finaling in that genre. But it was like, at some point at the conference, I'm like, back then, nobody was really buying that, in the Christian market. It was just too hard to sell. Yeah. I'm like, okay, I'm done. I'm out of here. So I ended up getting published, writing a romance, a straight contemporary romance, which I had never really wanted to do, but I did it because the door opened, and I'm walking through that door but somebody had reviewed the book and said, hey, this has got a lot of mystery and suspense elements. And so I just kind of really started grabbing onto that. I'm like, yeah, that's kind of what I put it in there, even though it's supposed to be contemporary romance. But I just did that with every one of my stories. So then with Love Inspired Suspense, it's 50-50, half romance, half suspense. And so, it just kind of, I feel like for writers, it can sometimes take many books and many years to figure out your niche and your voice and where you fit
Yes. So since you've been writing for a while, writing novels, kind of like what you just said, it can be a process where authors learn and improve over time. So if you could sort of boil down your writing career, what are some things that you maybe have learned that you didn't know in the beginning, but now you know? What are some great things that you've learned over the years?
Well, I think it's really, really important to set a goal, and something I did from the beginning, and I will stand by it. But like one of the years, I was like, I'm going to do these 5 things this year. I'm going to submit 5 proposals this year. Just write it down, set a goal. And I love going back to see the things that I've written down that have gotten done, books that have sold, and I can cross those off the list. Another really important thing I heard early on was, and I stand by this too, is to read, and write. Just never stop writing and never stop reading. And especially reading in your genre, and then never give up. I know that some people will come back and say, well, maybe you should give up because you're just not, you're not as, but I mean, if I had listened to that, I probably would have given up, before the ball got rolling. So because I was just so determined, and I just worked really, really hard. I mean, I went to the conferences, and my goal was to meet the editors and networking and learning. We never stop learning. So I'm always trying to learn a better way to do something for myself, or just, reading books on and picking up a tip here and there. So we're always building on what we already have.
Yes, no matter how long you've been doing it, it feels like there's always, and I haven't been doing it as long as you have, but it just feels like there's always something to learn somewhere.
Oh, yeah.
It's just,
Yeah. If you stop learning and growing and getting better, then you just, you're stagnant and you just get worse, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, and this is one thing that I've said on the podcast several times, and I will say it as many times as I have to. When it comes to readers, especially, I always tell people, especially if you catch an author in their earlier stages and you didn't really like their first book, or you didn't really care for their second book, give them another shot, because they're growing in their craft. They're growing in the technical skills that they need to do it. And it can take a while. I
wouldn't even want to, go back and compare what I write now to my very first novel that was released. And of course, it was half the word count, and it had parameters and limitations, but at the same time, it would, if I wrote that same book today, it would be a much different and I hope better book.
Yeah. I've got 7 books published, and I don't even run Amazon ads on my first 2 books, because I'm like, my older book, they're there, but I just don't run ads on them, because I'm like, I don't really want people to read them. So,
well, I guess we can thank God for out of print books.
Exactly. How long did it take you to get the literary agent?
I kept going back to the conference to meet with this one particular agent who I felt like I wanted to be my agent. That was Steve Lobby. And so I kept going back, and I want to say that probably 5 years of going to the conference and meeting with him. But I remember in 2009, I sat down with him at a 15-minute pitch, and he'd already asked for a full manuscript. I'd sent, a proposal in, and then back then you would get a letter in the mail. You sent in the manuscript, and you sent a self-addressed stamped envelope. Remember, in the good old days.
The good old days.
I was getting that letter in the mail, and my hands were just shaking. Oh my God. That means that he was asking for the full, and that's what you want. You're like, ask for the full. But by the time I got to sit down with him, I didn't want to write the full. And I remember saying, I don't want to have to write this,
Yeah.
And he looked at my proposal and he says, oh, I didn't know you had all these other books that you already published. But it wasn't until probably 6 months later they actually signed me. So, 5 years.
Okay.
Now, there was other agents I could have signed with, probably easier, let me say.
Yeah, well, he's the cream of the crop, though, really.
Right.
He really is. I just in Christian fiction.
Right. I had him, and I met him while pitching the sci-fi fantasy, because at the time, when he became an agent, he was the guy. He loved sci-fi fantasy. And so that's kind of how I met him, right? So you can see
Yeah.
kind of God's hand on how, you know what I'm saying, how things come to play. So
They
it
just
took
come
me
to
a
play,
while, and I couldn't be happier, you know.
Yeah.
And then I wrote, I think it was 2010, I sold to Love Inspired Suspense. Steve sent the proposal, and they didn't ask for me. I've actually never written a whole book before. I mean, I've always been contracted before I wrote a book, so I can say that.
Really?
And they didn't ask me for a full either. And so I
Oh,
sold to
wow.
them, and I just kept writing for them. And then finally in 2017, God opened the doors for me to submit a proposal to Revell. I don't know why it just took so long, but I remember just thinking, God, you know, am I ever going to write for trade?
Yeah.
And then a couple of weeks later, Steve emailed me and says, hey, Revell's looking for romantic suspense. And I'm like, oh yes, this is the moment. And so
Oh.
I didn't even have a proposal. So, that's what I put all my effort into, you know, 2 or 3 weeks. I wrote up a proposal, and I think it was just like a month later, I heard from an editor, and she worked with me to get the proposal right, because when you take it before the pub board, you don't want to give any reason for them to shoot it down. So I'm so grateful.
They're looking at so many of those.
Right. So yeah, so it was, you know, you can tell it's a long journey, and that's why I say to people, you know, just keep going. Don't ever give up, because you know, doors open.
Keep going, keep honing your skills.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And I feel like, you know, maybe that if I would have tried to get in with Revell years before, I wouldn't have been ready. I don't know. You know, and Love Inspired Suspense actually really taught me very well how to stay in my lane, stay in the lane of the genre. So I appreciate that. And so they got me ready for writing for trade.
Now, is Revell considered trade? Is trade secular? Or is
no, trade is just a certain size kind of book that you go into the bookstore.
Oh,
you know,
okay.
As opposed to category mass market. Don't ask me more than that, because I don't understand either. Why they
Some of those fine details are hard to. Yeah, you hear the terms, but you're like, you don't really know what they mean. Yeah. Well, as a busy author, how do you juggle getting the words on the page, and then, you know, you've got family that you have to deal with, or get to deal with? I don't want to say have to deal with, because we love our family, but like, how do you juggle all that and still get your books out in time? Do you do one book a year?
I'm doing 2 books a year for Revell. At one point I was doing 4 books a year. I was writing for Love Inspired Suspense, in addition to Revell, and I'm, you know, so it's just kind of 2 or 3 a year. Yeah, that question, it is a really, really tough thing. And speaking for all of my author friends, I don't know if it's just the times we live in, what it is, but life seems to be harder and more rushed. And so it is really, really hard. There's not that peaceful sitting. And this may be different for you, but the peaceful sitting at the computer for hours and getting stuff done. And I will say different seasons of life means it's going to look different. A few years ago, in fact, when I was writing my first book for Revell, I would write a scene, and then I would go walk for 15 minutes, 30 minutes. I'd come back and write a scene. And so at the end of the day, I had walked my steps, and I had written 4,000 words, you know, perfect. That's perfect to me. But I have not been able to get back to that, because different things happen. And I have a special needs son, and then my son was ill in the hospital, and this and that. And so it's just, I fit in the writing wherever I can fit in. And it is a priority, but you know, other things are also important. Your family's important. And so,
I always envy authors that work, you know, that write from, you know, 9 o'clock in the morning to 2 o'clock in the afternoon. I am all over the place. Sometimes it's, you know, 10 o'clock at night to 1 o'clock in the morning. It's just, there's no rhyme or reason to it.
Right. And I mean, my goal is to try to, you know, sit down at my desk and do the thing, but it's just, it doesn't always work like that. And then, you know, the other side of it is, if you look at emails first, you're in trouble. But I do, because, you know, there's always like something my publisher needs, or some sort of promotion, or some sort of thing I have to do immediately, and all these different things. And this is all writing related, because you're not just writing one book. You know, I'm editing. I've got to edit the book I turned in before, and that's coming from my publisher, you know, the first editor, the second editor, the proofreaders, the queries. And then I've got to do promotion for the book that's coming out in the future, and then, you know, all while writing the current book. And so, you know, it's layers and layers. And so
you always have a few balls in the air. You really do. It's a juggling act. It
is. So I try to do a scene a day. And sometimes, I mean, that's my goal. If it takes me a long time, if it takes me a short time. And if I'm on a roll, I'll just keep rolling with it. I'm not going to stop that.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
And then there was times in the past where I had to have what I call a writing marathon day, where I sat down and I'm like, I could do this. God help me. I'm going to write 10,000 words, and then I would do it, I was like, whoa, and I did it 2 days in a row or whatever. And then some days I'll sit down and try to do that. And I can't, but if a goal of 10,000 gets me 5,000, I'll take it.
Exactly.
So, and then it's like the weeks, the couple of months before the book is due, when, I'm sorry, guys, get out of the way.
Yeah.
I have to, I'm totally fully in, and everything else has to just go out the window.
Mama has to focus.
Yes, right. Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, my goal is always to write 2,000 words a day. And it's so funny how it works. If I can get 2,000 words a day, to me, that's a good day. Some days I can write 4,000 or 5,000 words in the same amount of time. Other days I write 200 words, and it was like blood, sweat, and tears just to get those 200 words out. It's so weird how it works sometimes.
Yeah, but you're writing every day, or you're trying to, and that's really what you have to do. And I feel like even with my books, if I'm chipping away, I mean, you can finish a novel chipping away and writing 500 words a day. You can do it. So
totally.
you just do. You just do. Sit down and write, and take what you can get. And the next day I'll try to go back and maybe flesh out the scene before, and then maybe 500 words turns into 1,200, or 1,000 words turns into 2,000 before I'm even starting my actual new word count. So
let's go into the book. Again, it's called Perilous Tides. It's book 2 in your Hidden Bay series. Yes, there's a beautiful cover. For those that are listening, hold that up again for a second. Do you mind? So for those that are listening instead of watching, it's kind of a dark cover. It's got a woman's face on the top. It's got kind of a foily looking font on it. Just an amazing cover. Revel and Baker, they really have amazing book cover designers.
They do. Yeah. And let me tell you, that is so important. I mean, it is, to me, just as important as the content. It's like people are going to look at a book and just love the cover. That's going to draw their attention. And then they're, hopefully going to pick it up because they love the cover. And so I am so excited to be partnered with a publisher that puts so much effort into, because, all the hard work that I put into it, and they partnering with them, of course, for the actual manuscript, but you don't want a cover to not be good. And to me, it's kind of like watching a movie. When the movie comes on and you hear the music, you're like, oh my gosh, this is a B movie. And you can tell that just from the music.
And I've always said, I want my books to look like they belong on a shelf with James Patterson, because that's the first thing people see. So do you pretty much just accept when you get that cover, when they send you that first cover, do you get any input on changes you'd like to see, or do you pretty much just accept whatever?
Well, we get to a lot of input up front. I get to tell them what I would, like to see, or I can say surprise me, or I can send them images. Now, usually the cover will look nothing like any of the images or anything I sent, but it will still have the same flavor and idea. You're just trying to get them ideas, because it's really hard to get what's in your imagination into someone else's head, So I trust them. I trust them.
Well, and I'm assuming that probably the cover designers haven't read the book, so they don't have any idea.
Well, it comes with, we have to fill out what's called a title positioning questionnaire. So that means everything about the book, including a synopsis and all about the characters and where the setting is. So they get all that information, including everything that I'm thinking about the cover. And then they just take that and come up with and usually it's like the final, anything that is going to be changed is usually not going to be very much. So, but I'm fortunate to have, great covers when they send them to me. So I don't have to worry.
Yeah, they are. I mean,
better than I could have imagined or done myself. So.
I've read several of Baker Revel, of their books, and there's never been a cover that I was like, yeah, boy, they missed the mark on that one. So they do have a talented team, it seems. So the book comes out July 15th. Is that right? Mm-hmm. July 15th of 2025. Yes. So take us into the book. Tell us a little bit about it.
Well, I'll start with the Hidden Bay series is set in book 1 is Storm Warning, and Perilous Tides is book 2, and it's set on the Washington coast of the
Uh-huh.
Olympic Peninsula, if I can say that right, with, sea stacks and rocks and giant, crashing waves. And it's all surrounding what I call a storm watching lodge, but there's lodges along the coast where people do come to watch the winter storms, especially. But
Oh, okay.
in the lodge, the characters, it's really tied together because the characters have come there to hide. So in book 2, in Perilous Tides, Jo Cottrell is there hiding because her mother was murdered 3 years ago, and her mother said, you got to go hide, and she doesn't know why. So she's there at the lodge, and she's was a forensic artist, but she's doing something different now. And then our hero shows up, and he is a former Green Beret, and he is trying to come back into her life because it's a reunion romance. Come back into her life, and he decided, I want to solve the mystery of what happened to her mother so she can be free and live her life. And anyway, the story opens with kind of another mystery going on where her father, that she's only known for 3 years, her biological father, has disappeared and left her a cryptic message. So she leaves her hiding place to travel to Seattle. So she's on the Washington coast, across Puget Sound, and she's on a ferry when she witnesses a murder. And
let me tell you, this part of the book is fantastic. I loved this part of the book. Yeah.
I'm so glad. The opening is the opening. So so the car, he sends the car off into the water. And so the hero has to save her, all the timing and everything. And so hopefully I worked that out pretty great. But I just had that image in my mind that I wanted to do this. And sometimes that is with a book, it might be that way for you, but I want to do this thing, and I've got to figure out how to make this happen. So I read several different events of a car going off. Not Washington State ferries. There's times when there's been rough waters, this and that. It's not a common thing. But if you bring in somebody who makes it happen, facilitates that adds to the credibility, let's say.
Exactly. Yeah. And as I was reading it, a movie popped into my head. I don't know if you've seen it or not. It's Double Jeopardy with Ashley Judd and Tommy Lee Jones.
I know about it, but I can't remember it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, there's a scene in there where she's in a car, she's handcuffed to the steering wheel, and the car gets pushed off into the water. And that's one of my favorite movies. Yeah, so if you haven't seen it, you ought to check that movie out.
Okay, I need to see that. There's nothing new under the sun, let's say, no matter what idea I come up with. It's been done before, or somebody's going to do it.
It's been done before, yeah. All you can do is put a different spin on it. So, but exactly. I don't have a problem with that, because you can have the same scene in different books, but it could be totally different because it's out of a different writer's mind. So I loved this scene. And just seeing how Cole is her ex, so he's kind of pining for her. He's on the bank and sees this car go into the water, not realizing that she's the one that's in it. He just realizes somebody might be in a peril, so he jumps in the water, and it's just a great action sequence there.
Yeah, so, I love to bring my the hero and heroine together in that kind of a way where there's just some sort of tension or some saving of each other or whatever, just to kind of introduce the reader into this is what you can expect going forward.
Yeah, the book takes place in Puget Sound, and so that's in the Seattle area.
Yeah, well, most of it is the Olympic Peninsula. So that is really to the, let's say, the west side of the Puget Sound, which is a huge area. So there's a lot of things. Yeah, a huge area.
And you are from Washington, so you're kind of writing in your own backyard, quote unquote. Again, I thought that was a very interesting location for a book because I have not read many books that are set up in that area. A lot of times they're in the South, and I'm from the South, so it's nice. I like reading books set in the South, but I really liked the setting of it, Washington.
Well, I'm a Texan, and we talked about this earlier. I'm a seventh-generation Texan, but before I even lived here, I was writing books set here because for 5 years, before I lived in Washington, for 5 years I lived in Oregon, and I just fell in love, the redwoods and the coast and the mountains and the Cascades and all of it. Oh my gosh, it's just so amazing. I'm so grateful to be living here now where I love to set stories. So I had been, for a long time, wanted to set a series set on the Washington coast. Again, the Olympic Peninsula a lot of it is wilderness area, and it's just very remote. And I've experienced myself going there and not having any cell service, not even having satellite. I like, we'll at least get our satellite going on the radio while we're driving, and it would just cut out, because
Yeah.
the trees or the clouds. I don't know why,
Yeah.
but to me, that makes for a great place to set a suspense story, because everything is just not readily available. You can't just call 911 and somebody's there in two minutes. Of course, they're not there in 2 minutes anymore anyway, but you know what I mean?
Yeah. And I'm kind of a weather junkie. I love bad weather. I don't like the destruction of it. So, of course, up in that area, it's sort of gray and rains a lot. And sometimes I feel like that setting can be almost a part of the character of the book.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. No, it added, I believe, to all the stories so far. And up here, it actually, for 6 months of the year, it's pretty much blue sky. So there's the rainy season. So it's really more the winter. But I say that
okay.
June 21. Actually, the first day of summer isn't June 21, the first day of summer. And it's rainy and gray outside. And the temperature is 53, and I love it. I'm here for it.
Oh, man, I envy you. Here in Arkansas, we're up in 90-degree heat already. And
Right.
I hate it. I'm not a summer person.
Right. No, I mean, I'm, from Texas, and the thing that I didn't like was that 90 days of blazing Texas sun. You open the door and it's like a heater just.
It is. You can't get away from it. It's just, it's like, I was talking to Tracy Peterson last week, and she used to live in the South. I can't remember where she said now, but she lives up in, I think, Montana now. And she said it gets really hot here wherever she is in the summer. She said, but it gets really cool in the evenings. I said, now see, that I wouldn't mind so much. If you knew that in a few hours it was going to be down in the 50s and 60s, the 90-degree heat wouldn't be so bad. But around here, once that heat set in, I mean, you can go outside at 1 o'clock in the morning and it's 90 degrees and it feels like you're sitting in a sauna. So
exactly. It's the same here. Open the windows at night, except for, we just got a warning from the state that bears climb through windows. That's what they were saying. Be careful keeping your window open. Bears climb through windows. So, we keep our window open. But the other night I woke up, I'm like, I just couldn't go back to sleep because I kept picturing this happening. And so I did go close the window.
Oh, yeah. That would make you think twice, wouldn't it?
Yes, exactly.
If I lived there, I love sleeping with the windows open. Like, I would be the one that would get eaten by a bear because I love sleeping with the windows open. So, yeah. So, okay. So let's go into Jo for a little bit. She is a forensic artist, again, which is not anything you read about in books. So tell us a little bit about her.
Yeah, and she, I got the idea for her and her mother, of course, is deceased in the story, but from an article or a mother-daughter team that is in. Now,
was her mother in the first book?
No.
Okay.
Yeah, so Jo was a character that appeared in the first book, but just kind of a side character. Anyway, so no, we didn't hear about her mother, but I got the idea from an actual forensic artist mother-daughter team, and they just had a real knack or a gift, a God-given gift, to really bump up the police's ability to find their guy, find their criminal. And just because a forensic artist comes up with a picture doesn't mean that it actually is that much like, so it's very complex. It's complex. And I didn't put a lot of that complexity in the story, but I just thought, this is really good. I like this, that somebody's got a real gift to somehow, listen to people and draw that picture. And then they can go out and get their person, capture their guy. So she had a real gift with that. And so, I just, of course, I took that story and just blew it up into something completely different. Obviously, that's what you do, right?
Well, that's what readers want you to do. Yeah.
And created.
Well, and I envy people that can do that, because I'm telling you, if I witnessed a crime and they were relying on my drawing abilities to find somebody, that person would be off scot-free because.
Well, I mean, there's all the computer and who knows what AI is doing with all of this now. I don't even know. Because it just seems like the videos, I mean, you can't even look at stuff and is that real or what is it? It's kind of scary.
Yeah. So this mother and daughter team, did you actually get to talk to them and pick their
I
brains
did
on what they
not. I
do?
did not.
Or,
I
oh,
just read
okay.
tons of articles all about them, and I just went from there, and
Yeah.
and just completely recreated. But I just thought the team I did was really good, and she worked so I
Yeah.
had Joe work very closely with her mother, and then also have the gift to be able to find criminals. And of course, she's not really doing that, but she does. In book 3, Joe is back to being a forensic artist, and so we have her helping the character in the next book.
Okay. So in
Draw.
this book, she's sort of outside
She's
of her
running.
normal
Yeah, she's
life.
running and
Yeah.
she's hiding, and she doesn't want to do that, but she's still
Yeah.
drawing pictures. And as you read in the book, that picture plays a role. She's drawing pictures, plays a role
Yes.
in the
Yes.
end. So
And I also enjoyed, one of my favorite types of book to read is family dynamic books. And there was even some fun family dynamics in this book, in that she was kind of trying to, her dad wasn't what he seemed, in a way.
right.
Yeah. So there was sort of her trying to figure out the family dynamic. I'm
Right.
trying to say it without saying too much because I don't want to give any spoilers.
I know it's hard, isn't it?
It's so hard to talk about a book without giving spoilers.
I probably gave a few away myself, but yeah, I mean, that is the characters and their interactions with their friends and their family is so important, and their, especially the parents, and just having all of that conflict coming in. It can be part of the main plot or a subplot, or just adds, builds the tension. It just makes it that much stronger, and more desperation and more emotion. And so yeah, I didn't really know when I started out how they were all going to fit together.
Yeah. So how easy or hard for you is it to, because when you're writing romantic suspense, mystery, that thrillers, like those are my favorite types of books to read. And I wish I had the skill to write stuff like that. And maybe I just need to try it sometime. But like how easy is it for you to sort of build, because you do need that tension and that, those little suspense points. How easy is it for you to come up with that?
Well, I think, when I was talking about it takes time, you're writing many books, and it takes time to figure out where you fit, where your voice fits. And I think that number one, I just kind of naturally fit there. The other piece of that is that I've read, I read in that genre all the time. And so when you read in your genre, you just kind of build the instincts, right? To know when things need to happen and how they happen. And I've written so many of these books too, so it's really just more instinct.
It's become more instinct, yeah.
And then I'm like feeling, I'll, in the book that I'm writing now, I'm feeling like, oh, this thing's, I need to change this up. I'm not, I need a pivot, or I need a twist, or, you just have this feeling that you need to do the thing. And then, in addition to that, I'll look at different kinds of plot structures, just to make sure I'm on track, and I am on track, just instinctively, and I'll look and just compare and make sure that I'm hitting all the points, that kind of thing. So, I make it sound like, oh, it's so easy by instinct, but it's still very hard to write all those details, right?
Until you've written a book, you just don't really understand how complicated the process is. Right. It very rarely comes easy. So, yeah.
No, it's kind of like everybody used to, would say years ago, it's like, oh, I want to write a novel one day. You hear that. And of course, now everybody is writing a novel if they want to, and good for them. But then getting into it, they can learn just how complicated it can be. And I know one time someone had asked me, he says, well, I don't know, how long does it take you, a day? Or I don't know. Day.
A day. Oh my goodness.
Oh my gosh, I never want to be fan of anybody, but oh my gosh, a day. But that just shows how they don't have any idea.
No idea. It's so funny because it takes months to write a book. But yeah, you're right. I think sometimes readers don't realize you can easily, if you've got the time, you can easily sit down and read a book in a day or two. That's why I'm not the typical reader when it comes to reviewing books, because I always review every book I read, like on Amazon or wherever I buy it, and I'm a little bit more gracious to authors than a lot of the reviewers I've seen, because I know what goes into it, so I don't know.
Right. No, I totally hear you, because sometimes, you'll read a review and you're like, and they just can be very brutal, and without taking into account all of the many hours of blood, sweat, and tears that have gone into it, and why not focus on all the good? you know?
Exactly. Yeah. But and we've kind of talked about that on the podcast. Sometimes it's so funny, as an author, you can have 100 great reviews, but you let that one bad review come in,
Mhm.
and that's the one that sticks in your mind forever. Yeah,
Yes.
and I don't know why. And I think probably it may be like that way for readers too. For some reason, the negative sticks in our minds a lot easier. You can like 99% of that book as a reader, but that 1% of it that you didn't like, that's what sticks in your mind, and that's what comes out in the review. So yeah,
I
yeah.
don't know what the answer. For years, I did let those things bother me, and you read them, and it just can paralyze you. And so
It
now I
can.
don't read them. I just don't
Yeah.
read them. And
Yeah.
I so much.
I'll go on Goodreads because you can sort of click on all the 5-star reviews. Like
Right.
sometimes I will go in, but I do not read 3, 2, or 1-star reviews. I have a friend that will go in and read them for me because sometimes you can get constructive criticism
Right.
out
Yes.
of a bad review. So I'm not saying bad reviews are in themselves are totally bad. Who was I talking to? It was one of the, I think it might have been Sarah Brunsfold. She was talking about a, a bad review that she got on one of her books. And she said, I didn't realize that how many adverbs I used in my book until somebody pointed it out in a review. And then she said, the minute I read that, she said, that's in my mind. That was in my mind from that point on, and I stopped doing that. So there can
Yes.
be some good come out of them.
Right. And I would say that
Yeah.
was probably a good constructive review, but a lot of times it's just this has too much, especially in the Christian fiction. It's like it's got too much God in it, got too much prayer, or not enough God, or not, same book, but
Yes.
some people are like, there's no faith message, or so, and then some people say, oh, I loved it. It was such a strong message. Same exact book. So,
Yeah.
you get mixed reviews on the same thing. But yeah,
Yeah.
if you can listen to constructive criticism, that is definitely something you can do. But I just try
Exactly.
to avoid, like I said, because I
You
can't, I
just
don't
can't please
really
everybody. So
right. Oh,
yeah.
exactly. Oh, that's so true. And
Yeah.
that kind of brings me to a topic I've talked about a lot, but in the case of writing romantic suspense, it's a really, really, to me, one of the hardest genres to write because some people want more romance, some people want less.
This
So,
was going to
yeah.
be my next
Oh,
question.
okay. All
Yes.
right.
Yeah. Yeah. Go ahead.
Cannot please everyone. And then for a long time, I was trying to do that. And I would just pull my hair out because, same book, but somebody's like too much romance or too much, whatever.
Yes.
So now I decided that I just have to write the book that I write the way that I write it, the book that I would want to read. And
Mm-hmm.
then I will find my readers, or hopefully they'll find me, the
Exactly.
ones that like my style, because everyone has a
Yes.
different style. And there is plenty to go around. There's people who write heavier on the romance. Well, if that's what your preference, you go read that. So
Yeah.
you can't please everybody. So you just have to write your story the way that you write it.
I like a little less romance and a little bit more suspense. Where do you fit on that? Right, like when you're writing your books, do you try to? What percentage of each do you try to hit
I
as you're
try to go
writing?
50-50. And that's how I
Okay.
learned with Love. I tried to do that and I did that with Love Inspired Suspense because that's what they want. So I try to do that. I will say, and I'm repeating myself, but some, people will read the same exact book and say it was more romance and suspense and vice versa.
Yeah.
Same book
Yeah.
that I tried to write 50-50. So, everybody's got a different scale, let's say, a different way they measure. And so I try to do that. So it's kind of, sometimes I like, I'm writing along. I'm like, where's the romance? But what I do is I write a very, very, very rough first draft. And now I'm thinking, you know what? That's probably just my outline. How people will spend a lot of time outlining, and I don't do that. I write a very rough first draft, and then I go back and it'll be like 50,000 words, and I'm supposed to write to 80 or 85. So I'll go back and I'll add stuff in and smooth out and flesh out and, add the romance, right? Just add all the magic back in. And when I'm done putting the magic back in and fleshing out and polishing, then I'm at sometimes even over my word count of 85.
Oh, wow. And then you have to start cutting.
Yeah. But it's not that hard to cut. I'm always more worried about, making the word count.
Making the word count. Yeah. And it's so interesting. That's how you do it. Cause I've got a series. It's a spiritual warfare, deals in spiritual warfare. And I've always been intrigued by the topic of spiritual warfare, but the books I've read on it, they're based more in the occult than biblical spiritual warfare. So that's
Right.
what prompted me to write that. And as I was writing it, I went in because it sort of blends, the books sort of blend the physical realm into the spiritual realm. So the characters don't know what's going on around them, but the reader gets to see the whole picture.
Oh
And
yeah.
that's sort of how I wrote mine too. I went in and got the story down, and then I went in and added some of the spiritual realm into it during the editing process. So
Right. Yeah.
yeah.
And that kind of reminds me of Frank Peretti when what you were describing. I don't know if that's Frank Peretti's novels, but have you read
Yeah.
Frank Peretti?
Well, I haven't until last October. Just once I decided I was going to write it, people were like, "Oh, you need to read Frank Peretti," and I intentionally didn't read it until I was
Right.
done because I didn't want his influence in my book.
Right.
So yeah. So I wrote the first two books in the series before I ever read his book, and then the third book in the series will be out probably in the spring,
Yeah.
summer of
You had to
2026.
figure out, you had to do it your way, and you want to, I totally,
Exactly.
and that makes sense.
And I've already had one reviewer like, "Oh, there's nothing like Frank Peretti." Well, I wasn't trying to be like Frank Peretti.
Yeah.
So it was interesting. You go in and incorporate some of the romance during the editing process too.
Yeah. And as I'm reading back through, though, I'm just expanding the creativity. I mean, yes, it's editing, but I'm just like, just expanding where I see it needs to be expanded. You know what I'm saying? And that includes the romance. And I need to beef this up, and I need more detail here, and I might go through, six times before I wish I actually had many more times, but the clock is ticking and it's a deadline. And
Yes.
so I will turn it in, and then my editor goes through, and then, if she sees I need more of this or more of that, fresh eyes, because after a while I can't.
That's what it's all about. Yeah. Now, do you use beta readers or anything like that during the writing?
No, because I don't have time. I mean, the first person to see my book is my editor, and that's kind of scary, isn't it? And there was a time in the past, I mean, probably at least a decade ago, maybe, that I would let someone else read it first, and I had, for whatever reason, I was able to get it done in time to do that. And what I discovered is that my editor is the one that matters, because they might, this other person might tell me this and that, and I make those changes, and the editor's completely opposite, right? And so like, this is a waste of time for me to do that. I just
and they're the ones that are fully immersed in the literary field, so they really know better than anyone what works and what makes books better and what improves them. So their opinion really is what matters
paying
most
for the book. So
yes, and you want to deliver what they want, right?
Right. So that's I kind of just landed there, and so it is just, and I actually am on deadline right now. I have to turn a book in August 4th. So
is that, I don't know about you, but one of the scariest things for me is turning it over to the professional editor, which I've got a little bit more leeway with you. Like, I send it through my beta readers. I've got a team of about 5 or 6 beta readers, and I send it through my beta readers before I send it to the professional editor.
Yeah.
Like, I just don't want the professional editor to think I'm dumb.
Oh, I'm sure that he or she would. Yeah. It is terrifying. I mean, I feel good when I do it. But what's the scariest part is when I do get the email from her that she's read it, and she's, gives me some heads up on what she loved, and then she has notes on what she, what needs to be worked on, and then kind of a letter, her notes, and that. I get the email, but it's so scary and painful, and I don't want to look at it. So I give myself a couple of days of like, okay, it's there, and then I read it, and then I let it settle in, and then I go back and fix.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, first, it's always a little bit uncomfortable reading the feedback, especially when you're reading, okay, didn't really care for this part needs to be improved. But then you also have to go in and fix it all.
Right. And I was going to say that. And you're like, okay, why did I say this? What did I mean? And then it's so funny because she'll say, what did you mean? Or in certain lines, I'm like, I have no idea. I knew when I wrote it, but I don't know now. So let's just delete it.
We'll just delete it. Yeah. How long do you get from the time you get the feedback from the editor? How long do you get to go in and make all those changes before it's to the next step?
I mean, it can be from 2 weeks to a month. It really depends.
Oh, okay.
I don't really, it's usually not significant. There have been, I think a couple of books ago, I did have a lot of stuff that I needed to fix, that I even found that I needed to fix. And that was a lot of rewriting for me. So, it's that part can be really hard because, and sometimes it lands, oh my gosh, we were going to the beach for the weekend or whatever.
Yeah, well, guys, we're not going to the beach, or at least I'm not. Yeah. There is just, oh my goodness, there is just so, and I imagine at that point when you get your feedback back from the editor, at that point the clock is really ticking.
Yeah, it is. But what I tell myself while I'm getting ready to turn the book in, I will turn the very best book in that I can turn in, but it's okay. It can be fixed. It can be changed, and so when I don't care what you see is wrong, we can fix anything and everything. And that is another thing I learned writing for Love Inspired Suspense, because they have huge editing process. They have lots of fixes and lots of changes. And I mean, even with the proposal, you have to send in, even with a book that you have contracted with them, you have to, give them a proposal, which is the synopsis in the 3 chapters, because that way they can go through the synopsis and say what they like or don't like, because they don't want all their books to be the same. They've got to be able to.
Yes.
So you have to get that approved before you even start writing your book. And then there's all that.
Wow.
So, when I came to the table with Ravel and they asked for, my first editor, asked for different changes, and she's like, you did it. I'm like, yeah, because I know how to do this.
Yeah. Not my first rodeo.
Right. No, it's all good. I'm glad that I got that much training, so it wouldn't be such a a hardship for me. But at the same time, I am biting my nails while I'm waiting to hear back from my editor.
Oh, I bet. Yeah. Well, and the good thing too about longevity, especially, how long have you been with Ravel?
My first book, I signed a contract with them 2017. And my first book came out in 2019. And interesting, because 2017 contract, a year later the book's due, and a year later it comes out. So it's like a 2-year.
So it's a long process. Yeah.
Right. So I have, let's see, my first series was Uncommon Justice, 3 books, and then Rocky Mountain Courage, 3 books, and then Missing in Alaska, 3 books, and then I'm currently on Hidden Bay, 3 books, so that'll be 12. And then I'm working on the first book in a new series that comes out next fall. So, lots of books with them so far. Yeah.
Well, and I would imagine, like, do you work with the same editor with every book, or does it depend on?
Yes, I did have Lonnie Hull DuPont to begin with, and then she retired, and then passed my books on to Rachel McRae, which is a new editor with them, and I was her first acquisition. I didn't even know that was a thing, but she sent me this really sweet letter about, you're my first acquisition, and I don't know, it just felt really special.
Yeah. Angela Hunt told me all about when we interviewed her. I didn't realize there were acquisition editors either. It was interesting to hear about that. So I would imagine the more you work with the same editors over and over, you sort of learn, well, okay, I'm not going to make that mistake in my future books. So I would imagine just the more you write, the easier it gets a little bit too, just because, again, you've worked with the same editors.
Oh yeah,
over time.
We get to know each other, and she knows the kind of books I write, and I know what she's expecting, and so and I think we've worked really well together from the very beginning. And then you have I get so confused with the next editor, what it's called, because different places call it different, but she goes through and just does more of the line editing and the fact checking, and just shoring it up and then sends it to proofreaders, and so that's when we're just kind of getting that final polish. So then I get to go through again with her and fix things, and then from that same second editor I get that's the galleys, me fixing, and then will be the typeset or proof pages, where these, any changes you make here are going to cost us a lot of money, because this is how we're sending it to the printer. So, but I get to go through it one more time, and the proofreaders do too. So many editors. I don't care how many people go through it. It seems like sometimes there'll still be a mistake here and there.
Yeah.
No matter how many people.
I see so many reviews where people are infuriated because on page 232 there was a typo. Out of 80,000 words, you're infuriated by one typo. I can understand it if a book has 20 typos, but for me, I've ran across them in Mary Higgins Clark books. And it's to me it's almost kind of fun, because it's like, I found something the professional
Oh,
editor
yeah, yeah.
missed, you know? So
And you
like,
want to
it
say
doesn't irritate me.
one word. So, what about the 79,999 other words? Were they okay?
Thank you. Thank you. But again, I think it's for some reason, I feel like it's human nature to latch on the negative things you don't like
Mhm.
instead of the 99% of the book you liked. For some reason, I just feel
Right.
like that's sort of human nature.
It is. And I was just talking about this with my son the other night. I guess he was saying something about a psychologist was telling him that children typically, going to adults, you typically remember the negative things about your parents more than you do the positive.
Yes.
It's just
Yes.
nature. And I think that's very sad. I
Yeah.
said, well, I
Yeah.
remember plenty of good things about my parents. So there. No,
Jesus just needs to knock that
yeah,
negative nature right out of us. Humanity would be a lot more pleasant if we weren't so negative.
exactly. Well,
Yeah.
I'm so grateful that Christian fiction even exists,
Oh, me
and
too.
that,
Yeah.
it's in bookstores and many readers and people love it, and people who are not even Christian or know about it will get their hands on a book. And I actually had a genealogy club out of some state do a book club interview
Uh-huh.
Zoom with me over my book Never Let Go, because my character was a forensic genealogist, and
Oh.
I don't know if they were Christians or not. They just were just a genealogy club, and they read my book and had lots of questions. And so I'm like, God, you never know where your books are going to show up. So we just keep
You never
writing,
know where it's going to land. Yeah.
and I just put in the spiritual. I just put it in. I just kind of let it grow naturally with my characters. You know what I'm saying?
Hmm.
In real life, how would this be for me if I was this character living in this story? Just, and then a theme will start to appear, and I might come in and
Yeah.
strengthen it a little bit, but it's just going to be a little. It's not going to be over the top or anything like that.
Yeah. Now, is there like a certain threshold that the publishing company likes you hit when it comes to incorporating Christian themes into it, or is it
They have
really
never
just
said
up to
anything
your?
to me at
They
all. Yeah,
haven't.
they've never said anything.
Okay.
And I'm assuming that, different authors, different books have, a different way that they add that in. And so we're all
Yeah.
just, they have many romantic suspense authors even, and we all write such different stories. And I think
Yes.
that's so great that they let us do it.
Absolutely. And as a reader, I'm grateful because there's something for everybody out there.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, if you've read any number of reviews, not even like on my books or on your books, but just Christian fiction in general,
Right.
there are so many reviews that you see where people do complain about, oh, well, there was too much Christian content. I suspect a lot of times those are the people that have gotten hold of the book, not realizing it's Christian fiction. And you kind of, part of you hopes that if it ever does, that something in it might touch people. But a lot of times people that get hold of it, that it irks them.
Yeah. Why is that part of the review? It's like, okay, it's a Christian novel, but was it a good story? I mean, you
Exactly.
ding somebody because you don't like that content. Well, that's what it is. It's a Christian novel,
Yeah.
so that people don't really, in that case, don't really know how to write reviews. That'd be like me reading like a horror book or a slasher and complaining because it's a slasher.
Thank you.
I don't know.
Well, yes, it's a thriller book, so there's probably going to be a death in it. Okay.
Oh yeah,
So,
right. Yeah. So I
yeah.
mean, same thing. That's the same thing. So okay.
I've even seen the alternate where Christian readers get irritated because there's not. I saw a lady on, I think it was on Instagram. She was like a bookstagrammer,
Mm-hmm.
and she was on a tangent about if your book's not at least whatever percentage, doesn't have scriptures and it doesn't have, very heavy content, you are just a fraud and shouldn't call yourself a Christian fiction. And I'll be honest, my human nature rose up a little bit because I was like, okay, you are part of what's wrong with social media. Because first of all, I love Christian fiction books that have heavy Christian themes, but I don't have to have that. I'm fine with very light because you know why? I read my Bible. I don't rely on my fiction to get you know what I'm saying?
Right. No, I totally, yeah, exactly. And I have had somebody give me, low reviews. They loved the book, but I didn't provide the faith message or, the come to Jesus salvation message in the actual book. And so she deemed me for that. But that's her
Yeah.
thing that she wants. And so, yeah, I mean, I don't even know
Again,
how to
can't
say
please
that.
everyone.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and then, one of my books, I write, I am a Christian and I'm filled with the Holy Spirit. And when I'm writing a book, you know, I'm writing the book that God wants me to write. And I'm putting in the
absolutely.
right amount of his message. In one of my books, I had somebody say, there wasn't any God in this book. And then someone else read that same book and it just touched me so much. She said, "Oh, I felt God through this whole book." You know what I'm
Yes,
saying? And I thought, because God
yes,
was there, he was writing with you.
exactly.
And you
Yeah,
were, you could feel that, but yet someone else couldn't. So anyway,
yeah.
like you said, we just write our books and sometimes my books are heavier spiritually and other times they're
Yeah.
less.
Some books are just more bent in that direction for whatever reason.
Right. Yeah. And it's
So,
just,
yeah.
but in all of them, my hope is to always have a redemptive message, and
Yes.
whatever that is, forgiveness or, letting go of the past and all kinds of things that, bring us back to hope. We have to have hope. And I mean, there's been
Yes.
books that I've read that or even movies, you're just like, you're just left feeling, everything it needs to have some hope in it, right? A redemptive
Well,
message.
that's what this world is looking for. They don't know that. The secular
Right.
world, they don't know that. As Christians, we probably all said this our entire life. It almost feels cliche, but I don't know how the world survives in a world without the hope that we have.
I don't
It's just,
either.
I can't imagine it.
Mm-mm.
Um, yeah, it's just, and
Maybe they're
that's
surviving because we're shining the light and they don't realize, you know what I'm saying? I mean, the light is being shined, and if maybe that's they're surviving and they don't even realize that they're getting some of that light. I don't know. That was just out of nowhere.
yeah. Yeah, well, and that's why I love Christian fiction. I'm so thankful. It was probably about 2 or 3 years ago. We talked about this a little bit earlier. I still do read some secular fiction, but I
Hmm.
predominantly read Christian fiction now. And it got to the point that, and I don't know, but it feels like here lately, secular fiction is getting so depraved.
Oh,
And it's just the filthy language and just the spiciness of books. And I know there's tons of people out there that like that, and that's why I got tired of having to lay books down because it offended my senses. And
hmm.
again, we know, you and I know, that's the Holy Spirit in us. And I'm so thankful that I had Christian fiction to lean back on, because even if a book doesn't have a lot of heavy Christian themes in it, I still go out of that book just with a sense of peace, because
You don't feel dirty.
there's that, you don't feel dirty. Yeah, that's exactly it. You don't feel dirty. And even if it's just a thin, theme of Christian themes, it's still enough. Because in real life, most of us don't go through preaching at everybody. We show God through our life, through the way we act, through
Actions
the
and
way we interact with people. Exactly. And that's what I enjoy about Christian fiction. You don't have to have characters that are constantly preaching. I enjoy just watching them showing their faith through their daily life.
their
And
struggles,
so,
internal struggles, about right and
exactly.
wrong and God, and just reach, my characters will often, just kind of silently pray. I'm praying all the time because that's what I do all day long. I'm like, God help me, or this or that, so just being real.
Exactly. And that's really is what I see the Christian faith as. I don't see the Christian faith as hitting people over the head with their Bible or with our Bibles and constantly preaching at them. So it's it's more genuine to the Christian faith when it's not
Yes.
that heavy-handed. Now,
I
I have read some that were heavy-handed and I thoroughly enjoyed them. So I'm not
Mhm.
knocking those kind of books either.
Right.
But again, you find what you like and then that's
There's
what you read.
something for everyone, correct? And it's just
Exactly. Yeah,
clean fiction with a redemptive message of hope. And so I'm so
exactly.
grateful that God opened the doors for me to be able to even do this. I couldn't even have imagined being in this place. I mean, we have
Yeah.
dreams, but we don't always achieve those dreams.
No, we don't.
So I feel
Yeah,
like
yeah.
I pinch myself, I'm like, God, really? Thank you. Wow. I'm just like blown away.
Yeah, you really do love me.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
I'm
yeah,
just blown away by his goodness.
yeah. All right. Was there anything else about the book you want to say before we start wrapping this down?
No, just I do get it because Deadly Currents, book 3 is coming out next year. And
can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, actually, the first 2 books, as I mentioned, the characters are at the lodge, and they come there to hide, and so we have this character, Evelyn Monroe, that starts appearing. We don't see her, but she's in the background that kind of facilitates this. Well, who's making this happen? How's this happening? Who's making this happen? And there's also mention in book 1 of a ghost ship. So then when book 3 was coming around, my editor was like, "What's this going to be about?" And I said, "Well, I feel like we need to have Evelyn Monroe's story." I just love the freedom to, characters just start appearing you hadn't planned on. And I feel like I want to talk about the ghost ship. And she was really on board with that. So I just,
fun.
And I loved writing the book. I was kind of afraid when I turned it in because, we're always afraid. Is she going to like it? Is she going to hate it? Because, I tried to push the edge a little bit. And she said it was her favorite of all of the books.
Oh, good.
So
that sounds fun.
Yeah, it's just kind of tying up the ends, and she really liked how I ended the series as a whole. Now, all the books are standalone. They can be read. There's no mystery tying them together, really, but...
Yes, and I will say for listeners that are listening, that is true. I have not read the first book in the series, and I read book 2 just fine. I didn't feel like anything was missing, so... I always encourage people to read a series in order, but it is a good standalone.
Right. And I try to write my books all standalone, but for people who do love the series and the connections, they're all there as well. So if that's what you like, you can get the full experience reading all 3 books, but
exactly.
The books can be read standalone, no problem. So that's really what I try to do. So I'm glad that it works for you.
So, okay, we're going to start wrapping this down. So if you could talk to one person or living dead, who would it be?
I would like to meet with the Bronte sisters. Those 2 people.
Oh, okay.
They wrote Gothic romance. I feel like
they did, yeah.
Romance kind of have my roots in that before coming to romantic suspense, reading those books.
Tell the listeners where they can follow you online, or if they want to follow you on social media, where can they find you?
ElizabethGoddard.com is my website, and you should go there because my designer made this amazing live action Crashing Waves.
You've got a fantastic website.
Hidden Bay. And then in the very top corner, all the icons for all of my social media. I'm on Facebook. I have an author page. I'm on Instagram. I'm on Twitter. I'm on Pinterest and Goodreads and all of that. It's all there.
Okay.
And also find out where to order my books from the website.
Oh, okay. All right.
And
so just go.
You can subscribe to my newsletter and get a free book, also an ebook.
Oh, okay. Yeah, and the newsletters is often the place where you get the really good stuff that you don't tell anywhere else. So you got to reserve a little something for the newsletter. So,
right.
How often do you publish on the newsletter?
Once a month. I send it out once a month.
Once a month. Okay.
Yeah, and I just sometimes more than once a month because this month I'm now sending out an extra email just to let people know about some other romantic suspense authors that they might want to read. And I sent out a special exclusive content email to give them a sneak peek at my cover for my new book coming out next year. It wasn't even on websites yet, and so my publisher let me do that.
Sign up to authors' newsletters because that's a great way to get exclusive information. So, all right. So we are going to wrap this up. Elizabeth, thank you so much for coming on. You have been so much fun to talk to.
Thank you. You've been a great host.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it. So for the listeners that want to follow us, we are pretty much everywhere. We're on Facebook. We're on Instagram. We got a TikTok. We're under Bookish Introverts Podcast. You can email us at bookishintrovertspodcast@gmail.com. You can also go to YouTube if you want to watch these instead of listen to them. So Elizabeth and I are everywhere. You just got to come and find us. So, all right, Elizabeth, it's been a pleasure talking to you. We will talk to you soon. And listeners, we appreciate you listening in, and we got another great episode coming for you soon. So we'll talk to you all later. Bye-bye.
Thanks for joining us on the Bookish Introverts Podcast, where together we explore the worlds within the pages. Until next time, stay bookish.